I am a public health practitioner. I do actively work in public health, but I'm also a certified sexuality educator. And I do a lot of conversations with parents and emerging adults, teenagers, on healthy sexual relationships, healthy platonic relationships. Consent is a big thing. Having the talk, if you will, knowing that the talk is ongoing and it's not a one and done, as well as college age, what I consider emerging adults. Just on all things related to healthy sexuality.
What specifically do you do in public health, if you want to share?
Oh, sure. I work for a community-based organization that focuses on sexual health screenings, education, and treatment. So we do outreach and interventions related to HIV, STIs, Hep C, and we primarily work within the African American community. And I'm the director of programs there. So I oversee multiple grants that we have been awarded from the federal level.
Wow, that is really important and impactful work that you're doing. I'm curious, what led you here?
So I went a long way to come back a short way and all things in between. But I've been working in public health for 25 years. And I started out doing STI education in after school programs, in guest speaking for health classes and other youth serving organizations in the late 90s. And at that time, we were really focusing on HIV, chlamydia, gonorrhea, all the top ones, but making sure that we were focusing on education, but also giving young people the tools that they needed to navigate the sexual health space, whether that is advocating for themselves in a clinical setting or negotiating with their partners what they were comfortable with and what they weren't comfortable with. And I started that a long time ago. And then as I matriculated through my doctoral program, I just kind of fell into working at the health department and then working in academia for 14 years in Master of Public Health and Doctoral Public Health program. So I kind of had a what we could consider a practitioner scholar experience where I've had the public health experience and I translated that into the classroom and then left the classroom to come back to practice.
I'm really curious. You're in a position where you are extremely educated about sexuality and human sexuality, so much so that you educate others about it.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the gaps? Where are the gaps that you see?
Mm.
And are they the same gaps now that they were 14 years ago?
So that's a great question. I would say the gaps are very closely aligned, but there's more access to information in 2023 than when I started in 1998. We still see that adolescents are not given across the board medically accurate, comprehensive sexual health education in schools. We still see that in 2023. We see a lot of abstinence only. We see a lot of abstinence plus. The difference now is with social media and the advent of the internet, there is immediate access to information, correct and incorrect. So a lot of times we have to navigate the space where we are combating inaccurate information or myths with medically accurate information and making sure that we're getting the positive messages out. But we also see with social media that there's also ease of access to information that is not always age appropriate. So with no comprehensive sexual health education, we see young people left with questions and not always a resource to get the information that they really need.
I'm curious why you think there's not comprehensive proper sexual education? Why is it still so inadequate, still so abstinence based? Why are we
You want
still,
my you want my personal opinion?
yeah,
I think that we are afraid to speak to young people about pleasure. And when you talk about comprehensive sexual health education, it's not just, you know, masturbation, it's not just penis and vagina sex, it's all that goes along with that. And I just don't think that across the board we're ready to have those conversations. We would rather go to, let's say, a cooking class and focus only on salmonella instead of talking about how wonderful the food looks, how wonderful the food tastes, how wonderful the food smells. And that's kind of what the approach has been for sex ed in a lot of areas. We want to talk about, we don't want you to get pregnant. We don't want you to have a sexually transmitted infection. End of class. We don't want to talk about, let's talk about what your body is supposed to be able to do. Let's talk about what your parts are designed for. Let's talk about being able to be comfortable with your body. When I talk to young people, I let them know this is the only thing that we have control of. You are with it all day. It is the one thing in life that is yours. No one, in theory, no one can take your body away from you. So you should know your body better than anybody else. So you should know what feels bad, what feels good, what feels normal to you. And I just don't think that we're ready to have those type of conversations with young people. So we would rather lean into avoidance with, let's just talk about all of the bad things that can happen. And then when those bad things happen, we say, see, told you, as opposed to approaching it from having informed youth that can advocate for themselves in and out of a clinical setting, or even in and out of a bedroom setting, or anything like that. We just aren't comfortable and prepared to have those conversations. But that's what Dr. J says. That's my personal opinion.
you've mentioned, you don't think we're comfortable having those conversations with the youth, but I'm curious if you think we're comfortable having those conversations at all with each other. Because when you talk about something that you touched on, which is really powerful, we go to a cooking class and we focus on the salmonella and we focus on all the things that can go wrong, but we don't focus on how delicious the food is,
Mm-hmm.
how bonding it is for people, bringing community together,
Mm-hmm.
families together, whatever the case is. We don't focus on pleasure actually in
Right.
general in this
We
culture.
don't. And when we have situations where pleasure is discussed, you see a lot of squirming, a lot of discomfort. And so, yeah, I would agree that not all of us are prepared and comfortable having those conversations with ourselves or with our partners. I did a men's group a few months back, and it's the first time I've done an all men's group in a very long time. And we talked about, when is the last time you actually asked your partner what felt good or what they wanted, as opposed to thinking, oh, well, I get this response when I do this, so I'm just going to do that. But having an open conversation about, I really don't enjoy that. We don't want to hurt the other person's feelings. We don't know what the person is going to respond. And so we kind of just hold it in and not always say what we feel. And I think that is also generational, because I am 50. And so I have conversations with my 19-year-old and my 23-year-old about all things sexual health. Um, I have conversations with them that my parents did not have with me, because it was not something that was openly discussed. And my parents are 85 years old. So I also think that younger generations are thirsting for information, and not all age groups are comfortable sharing their experiences, or saying, I really don't know, let's find a resource together. But then you do have those pockets where people are very comfortable discussing it within their friend group. But where does it go after that? But we don't do that just with health conversations in general a lot of times.
When there is comprehensive sexual education that you've seen be given to someone in their youth,
Mhm.
what has been the result of that?
They are better equipped not only for romantic relationships, but navigating platonic relationships and advocating for themselves in all health settings. Um, we can use the example of mental health, which is another issue that is often spoken about in secret and still has a little taboo associated with it. But um, I see that and I read that when there are open, honest conversations that are age appropriate, and I want to stress that because I would never talk to a 5-year-old about sexual relationships, but I would talk about body autonomy. Another example would be the holidays are coming up. And as a parent, I have seen it and I almost kind of did it, but we love the idea of having our children's picture on Santa Claus's lap. So we go to an unfamiliar place or familiar place. We go to a mall. We see a strange man that we do not know, and then we tell our child to sit on their lap, and we want them to smile. Don't cry. We are going to get this picture. Well, if the child is afraid, if the child just really doesn't want to do it, oftentimes we as adults force it because we want that picture with the Easter Bunny. We want that picture with Santa Claus. But what is that teaching them? It's not teaching them that they have a say in what happens to their bodies. Same thing with hair. Is particularly in the African American community, it's inappropriate. Like my hair is big and wild, and oh my goodness, can I? No. So if we teach young children, it's not appropriate for them to do it to someone else, and it's not appropriate for it to be done to them. So all of those lessons are stackable to more mature conversations, but they start very, very early if done in a comprehensive manner. Another thing that I have experienced as a parent is using proper terminology. So we can call this an elbow, we can call this a knee, but then when we talk about our genitalia, we have to come up with a different cutesy name for it because it's inappropriate to call it what it is. So all of these things, it's not just including the sexual interactions for a comprehensive sexual health education. It's all about just including age appropriate and medically accurate information that are aligned with becoming, your own best advocate in all settings.
This idea too of body autonomy, it's interesting because I recently talked to someone who was telling me that she had hugged her 5-year-old, and her 5-year-old said, "You didn't ask if you can hug me." And I was like, wow, that is advanced,
Mm-hmm.
because when I was growing up, if my mother or someone in the family or friends or whatever hugged me, it was like, you better hug them back.
Or the grandparents and the older aunts and uncles, and go over there and give your grandmother. What if I don't want to kiss them on their face? What if I want to give them a handshake or something else? You're basically telling me that person is an adult and I need to do what they say.
Right. And what messages?
Which
Yeah.
exactly, what message is that delivering?
This concept of pleasure and our societal aversion to it,
Mm-hmm.
it's really tricky because
Mm-hmm.
we're kind of in this society where you actually can get punished for having too much pleasure, even if it's I don't know, a nap that went too long, or a vacation that lasts too long, or too many slices of pizza or cake, or whatever the case is. You can be
Mm-hmm.
judged and stigmatized, and especially when it comes to sexuality.
Mm-hmm.
So if there aren't that many outlets for people to indulge in pleasure or even talk about pleasure, because like you
Mm-hmm.
mentioned, you may be able to talk about it in your friend group, but then what? Where does that go?
Right.
How is that beneficial? If people don't have these outlets, where does it show up? What happens?
I think that if we don't have outward opportunities to express joy, desire, pleasure, and all of the feel good things that we often internalize them and hide them and kind of keep them to ourselves. It's like you said, it's very tricky to think that you can be punished for enjoying yourself, whatever that looks like. If you are, well, you went for a walk that was way too long and that's inappropriate, or you took a bubble bath and that was just, what were you in there doing? Um, it's it's tricky, but at the same time, I feel like we need to advance the conversation of how we define self-pleasure, because when I say that, immediately people are like, oh, she's talking about masturbation. No, self-pleasure is anything that I can do for myself, with myself, that I enjoy. That could be a long walk, it could be reading a book, it could be getting all dolled up to go to the grocery store, whatever makes me feel good. And if it's for me, with me, then it really shouldn't be, shouldn't, but that's not the society that we live in. It really shouldn't be anyone else's place to regulate that. However, when we see it impacting others, then yeah, we can have a different conversation about that. Well, you neglected to do something, or this was excessive because it impacted your daily routine of whatever that looks like, and that negatively impacted someone or something. But if I am doing with myself and for myself something that feels good, then how is it that we can critique that to become something negative?
So I want to kind of now pull in, look at this a little bit through the lens of the platform Live Jasmine, just because
Mm-hmm.
that's where we're from. So we'll use the example there.
Mm-hmm.
Part of what inspired this whole project was seeing how much stigma and judgment and backlash there are towards the models on Jasmine and the members, people who use
Mm-hmm.
the platform.
Mm-hmm.
And the Kinsey Institute has been doing a lot of research on Live Jasmine and its user base, and they found that the models who make the most money, and there's over 100 millionaires, Jasmine millionaires, they become millionaires from camming. That's significant in a short amount of time, 2, 3 years. The models who are on the longest calls are talking the least about something explicit.
Mm-hmm. It's
Really,
that human connection.
the human connection.
But
What
remember, we started early in the conversation about we aren't prepared to have conversations related to pleasure. For whatever reason, that in itself is, it's almost as if we are here for the sole purpose of not having pleasure. Because you use the example, or we talked about food, and it could be because I've not had dinner yet, but if you eat too much cake, if you eat too much ice cream, if you indulge in, we can talk about non-sexual activities. Yes, they could have health repercussions if you are really, mismanaging your diet and things, but just in general, we don't want to, we always have a raised eyebrow when someone enjoys something a little bit too much. I remember 1,000 years ago in my women's health class in undergrad, one of our very first assignments was to go home and look at our genitalia. And you tell a group of, 17 to 20-year-olds, go look at yourself and draw it. Oh, it's kind of like, I'm not supposed to look down there. I'm supposed to keep it clean and that's it. I'm not supposed to know anything about it. It's a mystery until I get married on my wedding night. Um, so I would agree. We don't live in a society, like I said, that prioritizes pleasure, but we also don't live in a society that allows free exploration without a lot of, I'm going to use the word judgment, but without a lot of support. I'll
Mhm.
say that. So we have young people that don't necessarily know how their bodies work. We can use the example of inserting a tampon. If you asked a boy where the tampon went, um, they may tell you it goes in the same place that urine comes out of. Um, if you ask a girl or kind of to describe certain things, they will be able to describe it and not necessarily be able to actually name and label the parts. And it's one of those things that is very heteronormative in that we assume uh, females assigned at birth should know this, males assigned at birth should know that, and the two don't need to necessarily know how the other parts work and know what the other parts are. So it's kind of the same thing. And then you have generations that never really learned about orgasm, what it feels like, the various types, and how you can achieve orgasm. And then they're not able to share that information with their partner or with anybody else. So again, we are discounting the conversation on pleasure and what feels good.
What do you think are some of the biggest misconceptions that you see that are kind of mainstream about human sexuality that are just not true?
So a myth.
It could be a myth, a misconception.
Okay. Misconception number one is that penis and vagina sex always leads to orgasm for the receiving person. Big, big, big misconception. Um, Another would be that butt stuff or butt play, anal play is for men who like to have sex with men. Another one. Um, it's kind of almost everything is taboo if it's not penis and vagina sex, or very vanilla. Anything other than, missionary, or if you're feeling really frisky doggy style, is bad. That means that you are for the streets. um, yeah, that's it. I could go on for those things that are just kind of sit you back and like, oh, really? I was, all the studying that I did, I was completely unaware of that one. I didn't know that was true. That it's some things are just absolutely absurd.
It's interesting because especially the biggest one of the biggest ones is the idea that penis and vagina sex leads to orgasm for women.
And that's the only acceptable kind of sex. Unless it's his birthday, and then oral sex is completely appropriate only on his birthday or Christmas.
Yeah, his birthday every other year. Yes. But, you know, I was talking to someone who really broke it down, and it really shocked me when I thought about it because a vagina gives birth. So it doesn't have as many nerve endings as the clitoris does because babies come through there. You don't want more nerve endings there, or it would be completely unbearable to give birth. It can be a challenge already. So then, though, we have this organ that, as far as we know, is literally
The
only.
only purpose it serves is pleasure. But in the grand scheme of things, in a in a penis vagina relationship, that it's rarely found. So yeah, it's interesting that, again, but I think that goes, we could have a different conversation about whose pleasure is of value. And oftentimes the pleasure for female bodies is not always prioritized in the relationship. I mean, if we talk about the orgasm gap and uh vagina owners in heterosexual relationships have less orgasms than any other coupling, should, it kind of tells you right there that it's not always prioritized.
There's almost a encouragement to just fake it. Just fake it.
Oh, don't even get me. Somebody said that. Again, I was talking to the men's group and then we talk about Harry Met Sally. And I said, women faking it, you're literally training that person to always not pleasure you. Like, you're never going to get pleasure because they thought, oh, this is the move, this is what I'm supposed to do, and you encouraged that for whatever reason, and either you didn't know what it was supposed to feel like, you were ready for it to be over with, you thought that's all there was, and that's kind of where it ended. So you've trained that person to never give you the pleasure that you are desiring.
And then how fulfilling is that? So it's like, again, it makes sense. I don't know. Well, let me get your thoughts on this. There seems to be a special, female sexuality is especially controlled.
Yes.
And like you said, if there's anyone's pleasure that is policed or stopped or prohibited more, it's typically a woman's or a female's.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think that is?
Well, we have in history have always come second. So even though the book says she comes first, we've always come second in priority. Whether we're talking about voting or the workforce or any of those other things, we've always been looked at as not as important as our male counterparts. And that has spilled over. We're for their pleasure. If you think about concubines and just kind of go throughout history, and in other cultures, just how far they have gone to ensure that females do not have pleasure. That's just that has kind of been since the beginning. But I do think that, again, it being generational, in my particular age group, I think we are reclaiming some of that.
With your experience and your knowledge, if there was one message that you could give to everyone in the world about
Mm-hmm.
sexuality that
Mm-hmm.
you don't think the world is quite getting yet, what would that message be?
I would say that message is she matters. Sexual health education matters.
Wow.
Like that, don't you? Like that one. Yeah, I would say that it matters. We don't just buy a car without learning how to drive. And when we get it, most people don't read the manual until they need to figure out how to do something. So it's kind of the same thing. Like, sexual health education matters. We need to know beyond, salmonella in the kitchen. We need to know beyond that.
I know I didn't learn beyond that. It's not until you are really at the age that you might be having sex. Like, obviously, sex education to some degree comes, I remember it, I think being in fifth grade or something like that. But I only learned the practical.
Yeah, you probably learned how to swaddle a baby before you learned what an orgasm was.
Yes, orgasm. What's that? I had no idea that a reason someone would even have sex was for pleasure until way later.
Mm-hmm.
So then it's like you said, if you don't know how to drive the car, but you have a car, you can get into trouble, you know?
Yeah. And like I said, I think a lot of the lessons that we would want to see in a comprehensive sexual health education program cross over beyond romantic relationships. We hear a lot about cyberbullying. We hear a lot about young adults and emerging adults being in compromising situations where they don't know how to get out of something. They haven't agreed to it, but they also haven't been their best advocate on, no, I do not want to do this. And those lessons and those negotiation skills come when we talk about healthy relationships. And relationships could be familial, friends, platonic relationships, as well as romantic relationships. It's not just all about penis and vagina sex. So it's much more than that. And when we think about the broad spectrum of sexuality, not everyone is engaging in penis and vagina sex. So we still want to have medically accurate information being communicated. We still want to be able to talk about what our parts are, what our parts can do, what is something that we may be concerned about our part. Like, we still want to have those conversations, the anatomy and physiology of us. Again, this is the one thing that we have. We're with it all day, every day. If your foot starts hurting, you're going to go to a podiatrist and, oh, I don't know. So it normally doesn't feel like that. So what's normal for you? You would want to know those things as well.
What would you say are some of your goals with the work that you're doing?
I would say my biggest goal is to just prepare young people, particularly those that are going from an education in middle school, high school, directly into the workforce and not going to a 2 or 4 year university, because we are seeing that there's a gap there where if young people are not going to a college or university, then they are missing that opportunity for a formal educational moment. So that would be one thing. And also, because we see so much in the news, particularly around the LGBTQIA plus community, that having conversations with parents to allow them the opportunity to be more comfortable with where we are today in 2023, to be a trusted resource. And they don't have to have all of the answers, but to be a welcoming environment for them to say, I don't know, let's go find out together.
Mhm.
Those will probably be my two biggest.
That's huge.
Yeah,
Even that moment right there, from my understanding, could be life-saving. That
exactly.
cohesiveness. Yeah. Is there anything about your work, human connection, human sexuality, even camming, that we haven't talked about, but you want to share and you feel is important to share?
I think we touched on it very briefly, but I would say that we need to have conversations around consent from an earlier age. And that goes again, leads into those familial, friendship, platonic relationships before it even gets to a sexual relationship. Having conversations around consent and what that means and what that looks like for a specific individual.
I couldn't agree more. Do you feel that people are becoming more, how do I want to ask this? Not educated, but maybe more sexually positive and healthy, or does it seem stagnant to you?
No, I would agree that I think we are seeing more positive illustrations of the diversity of human sexuality in mainstream media, whether that's a same gender loving relationship, a non binary individual, an asexual individual. We're seeing more of that. And the more exposure that we have, the greater my hope is that we will have a greater understanding. Some would say, well, the more we show it, the more other people are likely to want to do it. And I would counter that with the more we show it, the likelihood of someone having a better informed experience is what we're hoping to create, bringing normalcy to our lived experience, whatever that looks like.
My final question for you is, based on your knowledge, your experience, what do you think are the key next steps for laying and building a more sexually positive or just sexually well society, either individually or collectively?
So collectively, I would say we really need to enlist the support of educators who are with our children, 6 to 8 hours a day, to be better informed and to be able to provide the same level of education as it relates to sexual health as we do some of our STEM courses. You may not use your STEM every single day in every career, but you are going to use your body every day. It's with you. And then individually, and I tell people all the time, read, seek out information, seek out credible, medically accurate, and I've said that a few times, resources, and be your own best advocate in and out of sexual relationships. We talk about sexual health, we talk about mental health, we talk about physical health, and they're all interconnected. So being your own best health advocate by learning more about your lived experience, learning more about those things that you enjoy and that you don't enjoy. It's kind of the same thing. We've used food analogies. You may really have an affinity for a certain food and it not agree with your stomach. That's something you would want to know. And you would want to know why and what you can do about it. While you may see that you drinking a lot of water has positive impact on your skin. And so that's something that is desirable for you. People want to have clear skin. So learning what your body likes and what your body doesn't like as an individual is huge. And that's not just a sexual health thing. That's just a health thing.
I love how you said that. And I think it also gives people permission to explore themselves
Right.
and permission to know themselves,
Mm-hmm.
because so many people are so disconnected, not just from their sexualities, but from themselves, from their bodies. Like you said, noticing, paying attention, using food as an example. Um,
Mm-hmm.
when I eat this, my stomach kind of hurts. But when I eat this, I feel super energized and really good.
Exactly.
And then making decisions from there, but being connected to your body. And it can be sensual and sexual, though. Pay
Mm-hmm.
attention to your fantasies, or
Mm-hmm.
what turns you on, what doesn't turn you on, and explore it. Get curious about that. I think that is so important for people,
Right. I agree.
for all of us. Yes. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. My nerves didn't get the best of me. So
I told you
yeah,
you'd
thank you for
forget.
having me. Yeah, thank you for having me.